Hi everybody. I know it's been a while since there's been any activity on the channel. There is a reason for this, couple of reasons, and I'm going to get into those in a minute. Before I do, I would like to say that the subject matter of this video and the context that I'm about to provide is of a personal nature. I won't be going into all the intricate details, not every little bitty thing you need to know about, but I'll dive in a fair amount so you know what's been happening. I know when a channel goes quiet for a while, people start to wonder what's going on, and I don't really want to leave you lot in the dark indefinitely. At some point, I'd always intended to make a video and update you lot what's been happening, but it's just been one thing after another, and it's never been the right time to sit down and focus on explaining everything, but find myself with a few free minutes just to get my head straight. Find myself with some alone time, have a bit of peace and quiet for a couple of hours, so now it feels like a better time than any. I understand that not everybody that's subscribed to me is here to know my life story. I know you're just here for the content in that case. So this video might not apply to you, but I'm probably going to do some general channel updates at the end. If I do that, there'll probably be a time stamp somewhere on screen right now telling you what part of the video to go to if you don't want to hear my backstory of what's been happening. But anyway, yeah, I'm just going to get into it, I guess. I'm kind of waffling and stalling for time for no reason. I'm going to be talking about my grandmother, and for the rest of this video, I'll be referring to her under the Turkish phrase Nene, and Nene in Turkish is grandmother, and it's the name I refer to her as. It's the name that comes easily to me. It's the name that I find comfortable saying. I prefer saying Nene more than grandmother, so from here on out I'll be speaking about my grandmother using the Turkish phrase Nene. When it comes to my Nene, she was a very, very crucial figure in my upbringing. I come from a family that is splintered in all directions. Both sides of my family, from my mum and my dad's side, it's difficult to navigate the threads of this family because people are all over the place. Some people don't talk to other people and so on and so forth. And my upbringing was very splintered in that sense. Certain key role figures that should have been present at certain points in my life were not present. And it left other people to fill those roles. One of which was my Nene. She ended up filling a lot of roles that should have gone to other people. Essentially what I'm saying is my Nene was practically a second parent to me. She was like a core parent even. You know, she taught me a lot of the morals that I have now. She was the kind of person that was very selfless. She came from a war-torn age. She grew up during the wars. She grew up with hardly having anything to her name. And in turn, that made her a very selfless person. It made her very appreciative of very, very simple things. One of the most things that she ever really appreciated about me was just talking to her. You know, something as simple as that, just having a phone conversation. She didn't ask for a lot, but she gave a lot, and that was my Nene. She was one of the key factors into me being raised properly during my childhood, during all the ups and downs of family life. My Nene was that iconic. She was that central to my upbringing. So when I say that my Nene is a very important person to me, saying that phrase, my Nene is a very important person to me, is not doing it justice. I can't really find the words to express just how important this woman was. Obviously what happened last year, we went into COVID, all the lockdowns started happening, and my Nene, obviously we couldn't risk potentially accidentally passing on the virus to her because she was an elderly lady. She was in her early 80s, and catching COVID at that age is like a death sentence. So me, my mum, we made sure that we were keeping distant from her. We'd only ever go around to take food, medication, those things. Visiting completely stopped. Even when we was taking food round, we had to be careful. We had to go in the house with the mask on, keep our distance, those kinds of things. So for the last year, the whole of 2020 went by and didn't really see much of my Nene, which was already difficult enough. But then one night in November 2020, towards the middle end of it, we get a sudden emergency phone call from my Nene saying that she's on the verge of passing out. We need to come there right away. She needs help. And this is my Nene. She's a very strong, solitary, sort of self-sufficient person. So for her to call us and go, I need help, I'm going to pass out, that was alarming already. So we rushed round to my Nene's house. We let ourselves in because we had a spare key. The house is pitch black. Going to the living room, she's practically passed out on the sofa. I've never seen her like this. So obviously we get a bit scared. We call an ambulance. The paramedics arrive, trying to figure out what's going on. And basically what it is my Nene was diagnosed a few years ago as having a gallstone in her bladder. And because she's such an elderly lady and because she had so many different operations in her elder years, the doctor who said, hey, you've got a gallstone in your bladder, he basically said, you have two options. You can either have an operation, which means that the healing process might take a very long time, or you can try to live with it, but you just have to be very careful in what you do. Obviously, my Nene didn't want to have any more operations, so she chose to live with it. And for a good few years, she was totally fine. She learned to be careful, things that she was eating, be careful with those things, be careful with the activities, the physical activities she was doing. Very, very careful. But this evening, on that particular night, the gallstone itself moved inside her bladder and it started causing all these pains. It started infecting her slowly. She was, vomiting it looked like food poisoning, constantly vomiting. It was kind of horrific to see her in that state. So the paramedics arrived. They said, okay, well, we're going to have to take her into the hospital. We don't get a choice in which hospital she could go to. So the drivers said that the nearest hospital to her is Middlesex Hospital in North London. And if you're from North London or East London and you know of Middlesex Hospital, you know the state of that hospital already. So you can imagine the state of that hospital during COVID. And we didn't get a choice which hospital she could get taken to. She got taken to Middlesex. Because of the pandemic, they wanted to remove the gallstone straight away, but because of the pandemic and because of the influx of patients and because people were getting the virus at an alarming rate at that point, it was coming up to Christmas. People wanted to go Christmas shopping and do this and do that, and no one's wearing their masks and everyone's catching COVID, and now so many people are getting rushed into hospital emergency because of COVID. This hospital, which was already understaffed, which was already in a bit of a state already, is now getting hit tenfold on the amount of patients that are coming in. So my Nene, who was supposed to have an operation straight away to remove the gallstone and stabilize her condition, had her operation delayed 3 times. By which point, the gallstone had caused a huge infection. They done an operation on the gallstone to break it down. But by that point, it was too late because it had been just sitting there, causing pain, causing infection, and it caused an infection to her pancreas. And then at some point during all that, she got sepsis, which is a blood condition. So now she needs a blood transfusion. From the end of November right up until early January, every single day there was about 3 or 4 phone calls coming in where things were changing. Sometimes it got better. More often than not, though, her condition was in the red zone. It was negative. And then the worst possible news came through. She had contracted COVID while she was in the hospital. On the plus side, because she was in hospital, they hooked her up to all the necessary medications, the drips, She was in the best place to be to battle the virus. But we obviously found out where did she get the virus from, because she didn't get it while she was outside. She didn't get it while we were shielding her. No, she got it during the operation when they were breaking down the gallstone. They had to put a pipe down her throat, into her stomach, into the bladder and everything, break down the gallstone that way. And she contracted the virus from the machine they used. And at that point, I'm furious is saying the least of my reaction, but it was just unnecessary for her to suddenly go into that state when she was already in a severe condition already. And it fluctuated on a daily basis, as I said, and it came and it went, and it came and it went. And on top of everything else, because she was bedridden at the hospital, like her limbs started seizing up. As I said, she was in her early 80s. Movement for her was already limited. And now she was bedridden, strapped to machines, tubes, all that shit. And during all this, because of COVID, you can't go into the hospitals. So we couldn't go and see her. We couldn't go and spend time with her. We couldn't go and monitor her, because obviously the staff, the nurses, they're understaffed. They're not watching her around the clock. They can't. What would have been nice is if at the very least one family member could have gone in. But of course, because of pandemic, because of COVID, they weren't allowing anyone into the hospital. So we didn't see my Nene the entire time she was in the hospital. We were only able to keep in contact with her because thankfully, a couple of years ago, I bought her a easy to use mobile phone. She didn't know how to use all the smartphone things. But we got her this easy to use phone. So we gave it to her and she took it with her in the hospital. So the only way we were able to keep in contact with my Nene the entire time she was in the hospital was through that one mobile phone. And if she didn't have that, we wouldn't have heard from her at all. But as I said, because she wasn't moving, because the pain was severe, because of the complications from the sepsis and the infections, they had to do other operations, but they couldn't do it because there was fluid around the pancreas and they can't do anything until the fluid has subsided and calmed down. Complications upon complications. She went in with a gallstone, and by the end, she ended up having 23 different fucking things the entire time she was in there. And it got too much for her. And then one night, my mum gets a phone call informing us that my Nene had passed away from a heart attack. I like to believe that it happened in her sleep, because that way, at least in death, she wasn't suffering at that point. Because the entire time she was in that hospital, she was suffering enough. On the night she passed away, got a call from my uncle, my mum's brother. He was a person who I hadn't really spoken to much during my adult life. As I said, splintered family reasons, people are not in contact as much for this or that purpose. And my uncle wasn't someone that I had spoken much of in my adult life, but he contacted me that night, and he stepped up in a way that I hadn't expected. And he was just saying to me, we're going to get through this. Don't worry, because obviously, like when it comes to dealing with my Nene, my mum and me were super close to my Nene, so it fell upon us to deal with it. And my uncle just sort of stepped in and just said, "Don't worry." Like, he's talking to me in Turkish. Like, there's a phrase that we call some of the male elders in our family, we call them dayı. And there's a phrase that the elders use back from an uncle position. They call us dayım, like representative. So my uncle was basically saying to me, "Don't worry, dayım. I'm going to do everything, dayım. Don't worry. I'm going to go and deal with organizing the funeral. You don't have to do anything. Don't worry." And I was just kind of surprised by that. It took me by. I hadn't really spoken to this man for nearly 10, 15 years almost. And I never expected him to do anything like that. And he just stepped in. He was just like, "Don't worry, dayım. I got you. I got you." And things progressed from there. Obviously, we had to organize the funeral. So my uncle was running around doing for those kinds of things, coming to check in with us, making sure we're signing all the right papers. Because, when someone passes away and you're like the next of kin or the next of kin, all the paperwork comes to you, and it's a lot to deal with. When you're that close to someone, there is a lot to deal with. And I don't think I would have gotten through it all had my uncle not had stepped in to help me. Like, there was no way I was going to be able to do half the things he did. Like, for example, going to the hospital, because when they have to transfer the body, you want to make sure that you're getting the right one, because, as I said, this hospital can be quite incompetent, and my uncle already knew they were quite incompetent, so he purposely went to make sure and checked that we were being handed the correct body. And while all this was going on, my uncle was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, lung cancer in the chest area. It had spread really quickly. And he still was running around after us. He was still trying to help us as much as he could. And I was watching this guy deteriorate before my eyes, and he's still trying to help us get through it, because he knows that this was going to be the biggest turning point of my personal life. He knew how much Nene meant to me. He knew how central of a figure that my Nene was to me. And during my childhood, knowing that my Nene was going to pass away one day, it was always a huge fear of mine, just thinking one day, my Nene's going to pass away. I can't even imagine it. I know I've got a huge imagination. I can imagine anything, but having to imagine my Nene dying one day was something I couldn't do. And that day happened in reality, and I wasn't going to handle it. I wasn't able to handle a lot of it. And my uncle stepped in to handle those parts, because he knew how heavy a day this was on me. And all the while that was going on, he had stage 4 cancer. And they're expecting him to maybe live 6 months to a year. So my Nene's funeral comes around. Me and my uncle are there. We're carrying the coffin. It's an experience to lower a coffin into the ground and know that one of your central parental figures is in that box now. And I have to disassociate that so much, because if I let myself connect the person to that box in the ground, word of advice to anyone, whoever has to deal with this, who hasn't dealt with it yet. I mean, everyone's going to grieve in their own way. From my personal experience, try and disassociate the person from that box. And remember the life they lived. I have been in memory lane. I have to remember the person she was, not where she ended up. But anyway, the funeral came and went, and something profound actually happened, actually. We were just finishing the burial. The Turkish religious figure was saying some of the prayers in Turkish, and it had been raining for most of the day. And then just as he finished and the crowd went quiet, I heard one of my cousin's kids. I heard him, he was standing behind me, and he just went, "Hey, look at that!" And I just heard the crowd behind me go, and everyone was looking up at the sky. And there was a double rainbow in the sky, just at that point, just like at the very moment that the Turkish priest, the Turkish Hoca, he finished the prayers and everything, and it went quiet, and like 2 seconds later, this rainbow appeared, just over where we were standing, and it was just like, it was a profound moment, you know. I think a lot of us needed that. I think I needed that. To me, I mean, that could have happened at any point in the day. It just happened to happen at the quiet moment where everyone had finished saying what they had to say, and it went silent, and this rainbow just popped up. And everyone was taking pictures. They were like, "Oh my God, can you believe, look at this." And it was a very profound, surreal, bittersweet moment, I felt, to have a rainbow appear at my Nene's funeral. It gave me some comfort, personally. It made me feel like, you know, she was alright now. You know, she was better off now. She wasn't suffering anymore. And I took that away with me from the funeral. And I mean, at this point in time, we're still dealing with a lot of things regarding my Nene. It's not over. It doesn't get over that quickly. There's paperwork, and you have to confirm with the government that this person has passed away, and so on and so forth. It's a long process. It's a slow process, and it's still ongoing now. But after the funeral, we were dealing with that. When the condition with my uncle took a nosedive, it was already accelerating. So for him to suddenly get incredibly ill one night, like, he was feeling it already. He was already feeling the cancer take hold. But we were expecting 6 months to a year. But one night, his girlfriend calls us up, said that he's not responding. He's delirious. He's in and out of consciousness. They need to rush him to a hospital. So he ended up at Middlesex, which is where my Nene passed away. And as I said earlier in this video, you are at a hospital that is already in a bit of a shabby state, incredibly understaffed, incredibly underfunded, in the middle of a pandemic, during the winter period, where cases are soaring in this country. And now my uncle is in there. The same guy that helped me through my Nene's death, he's now in the same hospital where she died. And obviously, his condition is deteriorating. And then one night, obviously, the nurses can't keep a round-the-clock look on him. One night, he suffers 3 strokes. And he's left in a vegetated state. Like, over half his brain ceased to function. The man was dying. He wasn't going to survive now. There was no way they were going to be able to do cancer treatment after he had just suffered 3 strokes and he couldn't talk. And shortly after that, he passed away as well. And then we had a funeral for him. And along with my cousin, I got to carry his coffin. So when I say It's been difficult to deal with. I mean, like, I just can't phrase it. I can't figure out the way to phrase how difficult this has been. Like, it was an onslaught. Like, we're talking COVID. We're talking lockdowns for a whole year. And before that, I was dealing with a bunch of problems, personal problems that I had to sort out already. Then COVID happened. A fucking pandemic. Worldwide fucking crisis, for crying out loud. That made it difficult enough. Then that shit happens with my Nene. One of the biggest doomsdays, one of the biggest personal doomsdays becomes a reality for me. And then on top of that, my uncle, who was helping me get through that biggest doomsday, also passes away. At this point in time, I'm recording this at the very, very end of March. I have no idea when I'm going to make a video out of this. I would like to make sure I've got a video out so you guys know what's happened, know what's going on. I'll just be honest and say that after dealing with a domino effect of severe cases, severe scenarios, one thing after another, when you get hit with them 1-2 hit combos and you're just dealing with this shit and then something else hits you and you're like, okay, calm it for a second, please. And then it doesn't calm it. You get hit with something else. In this moment where I find myself with a rare couple of hours of alone time, a bit of peace, it just sort of weighs into perspective all the things that were once important are not as important. Things that I was stressing about 3-4 years ago don't matter now. They just don't matter in the same way. They might hold a place in my thoughts, but I'm not thinking about them the same way. Priorities got completely switched up. My life has changed. Like, so much is different now. It was already becoming different during COVID, but dealing with my Nene passing away and then my uncle shortly after, not even a month after my Nene passing away, he went. You get hit with them gut punches and it just sort of changes your perspective on a lot of things. So when it comes to what's happened, it's been a lot. And I'm not sure where I'm going from here. But at the very least, I didn't want to be one of these guys who creates content for 5 years and then just vanishes. There's nothing worse than creating a community, creating an audience for yourself, and then just randomly deleting your shit and vanishing one day. I didn't want to be that guy. So I figured, let me get my head straight and try and make an update video and speak to you guys about what's happened, what's going on, and where I am at now. And that's what I've tried to do here. Where I am right now, is I'm still in the process of dealing with my Nene's passing. There's a lot that still needs to be organized. And my life has changed. What does this mean for the channel then? Because I know some of you are wondering. You want to know where this is going. I've provided 30 minutes worth of context, so you probably want to know where this is going. I'll say this because I'm unsure myself right now. I will say that this channel is still going to remain here, and the content that is currently on it is most probably going to remain here for the foreseeable future. I have no reason to get rid of it. It is 5 years worth of content after all. It'd be a waste to just delete it. So it's there. But going forward, I'm not entirely sure things are going to be the same around here. I think content-wise, before I had a schedule, before I was aiming to do something at least once a month. That might not be the case now because I find myself with obviously less time, and I obviously find myself with less energy to commit to making loud, funny videos about something that I find is funny. I'm not finding a lot funny at the moment. But going forward in regards to this channel, I would like to keep the channel. And I would like to post stuff when I feel I can. During the time that I've been offline, I've played 1 or 2 video games here and there. I've been going through the grieving process, so the games I've been playing have been kind of selective. There's certain games I wouldn't play because it might make me feel a certain way. There's some other games that I played that did make me feel a certain way, therefore I wanted to try them out. So maybe I might talk about those games if I find myself with any free time to speak my thoughts about those games. But I'll say this, the channel's staying. I will use it when I feel I'm able to. But it's highly likely that from here on out, things are going to be different. Because things are now different for me. My situation has changed, my life has changed. And the things I will be doing in my personal and private and online life will be affected by those changes. This channel has always been a small channel. It's always been a channel that's mostly been spearheaded by me. And because I'm literally the main boss of the channel, because I am literally the sole figurehead that runs this channel, when this sole figurehead is affected by things going on, that sole figurehead is going to have to adapt. And therefore, every other corner of my life is now going through an adaptable period where I'm having to find my way with certain things. So I have been talking a long time, and I will wrap it up. I don't want to keep going on, but I didn't want to leave you guys hanging. And from here on out, whatever happens on the channel, happens on the channel. And if stuff doesn't happen for a while, stuff won't happen for a while because I'll be dealing with something. But if something does pop up one day, then hey, I'm here. I've posted something. I've also, I don't know how many of you lot follow me on Twitter, but like Twitter was the only place I would be posting any updates about my life, about what's going on with me. I took a huge break from Twitter after the passing of my family members. And I'm not as active on Twitter now. But the last thing I need to deal with is opinions. Just people and opinions and arguments and toxic tweets and just motherfuckers trying to get a rise out of you. It's just... So I posted on Twitter that I'll be away for a while and then I peaced out. I might try and filter back in a bit more regularly on Twitter. So I guess if you want any updates as they happen, YouTube isn't the best place for me to update to, but Twitter is. So if you want to stay in the loop for the foreseeable future and you are on Twitter, I guess follow me on there. But aside from that, I said everything I needed to say. It's a weird time we're living in. For real, like this COVID shit, the things it's done is nuts. It's astronomically changed the planet. It's changed people like me. And for any of you that are still watching this 40 motherfucking minutes into the video and I'm still talking, if you've actually listened this long and you care that much that you wanted to listen to every single word I said and you've been listening, I want to thank you actually genuinely, from the bottom of my heart. I thank you for your time. You didn't have to be here to listen, but you have been. And in response, I would like to extend my concerns to you guys out there, and I hope you lot are doing well during all this shit. I hope you're keeping all your heads up, and when the shit hits the fan, I hope to whatever God that's listening that you lot are getting through it. Because we need to get through this. One way or the other, we all need to get through this. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to leave it there. So, for old time's sake, I'll just wrap it up the way that I normally do. So, I've been DiGi Valentine. Thanks for your time. Take care. And hopefully maybe I'll see you all again real soon.